Welcome to our video on writing linear equations in standard form. We're going to look at standard form of a linear equation is typically written like this. Well, it's always written like this. And if we notice A, B, and C are all capitalized. And we have to make sure that A, B, and C are capitalized in standard form because in some equations that we work with, the letters are lowercase, and that B right there in lowercase means you typically know that that's the y-intercept, but in standard form, that B does not represent the y-intercept. It's a capital B. Slope-intercept form, it's a lowercase b. So we're going to pay attention to detail, and when we write standard form, we put it in capital letters for A, B, and C. X and Y can be lowercase. There are some guidelines that you need to follow when you do standard form. The guidelines. A, B, and C are going to be integers. Integers are going to be positive and negative numbers and the number 0. There will not be any decimals or fractions in standard form. And A and B cannot both be 0. One of those, A can be 0 or B can be 0, but they both cannot be 0 at the same time. And why do we say A and B both can't be 0? Because let's say A is 0, so that makes 0 plus, and whatever B would be, let's say it was 6. 6y is equal to maybe an 8. And this crosses off, and 6y equals 8, divide by 6, divide by 6. So y is equal to 4/3. And when y is equal to 4/3, that's going to be a horizontal line crossing the y-axis at 4/3. That's if A was equal to 0. If B is equal to 0, 0 times y is 0. And then so this basically 4x plus 0 is 4x. Divide by 4, so x is equal to 3. And we know when x is equal to 3 that that's going to be a vertical line that crosses at positive 3. And now, here's the reason why A and B both can't be 0, because we'll have 0 times x plus 0 times y is equal to, say, a number for C. We can just pick a number 4. 0 times x is going to be 0. 0 times y is 0. 0 plus 0 is 0. And in this case, 0 is equal to 4. And and we all know that 0 doesn't equal 4. So that's the reason why A and B both can't be 0. And the last part, it is suggested that A is not negative, which means A is positive. Suggested that A becomes positive. Let's look at what we're talking about here. We have a situation here where we're going to write the following equation in standard form, and I've written standard form right there for you, so that way you have it. And I've also put the guidelines right up here for you, so that way you can follow those along. If you have written them in your notes, then you can also look at your notes too. Might be a little bigger than what I was able to put on the screen. But if we look at this equation right here, we know that this is in slope-intercept form. Negative 3/4 is your slope. 5/8 will be your y-intercept. But what we're going to do is we're going to change it for ax plus by is equal to c. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's look at number 1. It says a, b, and c are all integers. Step 2 says there are no fractions or decimals. I'm going to, and these aren't really steps, they're kind of guidelines. So we're going to deal with guideline number 2 first, because when we deal with guideline number 2, we're going to clean up those fractions. We're going to make them into integers. The hint, I've written down a hint here for you. To change fractions to integers, you just multiply the equation, both sides of the equation, by the least common denominator. Well, if we look at the denominator and the slope, the denominator there is going to be a 4. And we look at the denominator here, it's an 8. And if we find multiples of 4, it looks like this. If we find multiples of 8, we'll find this many of them. Now, which multiples of 4 are also multiples of 8? And if we were to extend the list for 4, 24 and 32, 4 also goes into 24 and 32. But which one is the least common? 8 is going to be the least common. So we're going to have y is equal to negative 3 over 4 x plus 5 over 8. Multiply the equation by the least common denominator. So what do we do here? We're going to multiply the left side by 8, and if we multiply the left side of the equation by 8, we have to multiply the right side of the equation by 8. Okay, what are we doing here? Well, if you look here, we have the distributive property. So we're going to have negative 3 over 4 multiplied by 8 over 1. And when we multiply these, you can multiply them straight across and then reduce, or you can reduce first. I'm going to go ahead and multiply straight across here. We have negative 3 times 8, which is going to be negative 24, and we have 4 times 1, which is a 4. If you reduce negative 24 over 4, that's going to give you a negative 6. So when we distribute that 8 to negative 3/4 x, we get negative 6x. We have 5 over 8 now, times by 8 over 1. Like I told you before, you can reduce before you multiply, and I'm going to go ahead and do that because 8 goes into 8 once, and 8 goes into 8 once. If you have a number on top with a number on bottom, you can that you can reduce them, you can go ahead and reduce those. And so now we multiply straight across. 5 times 1 is 5, and 1 times 1 on the bottom is going to be 1. And we know that 5 over 1 is 5. On the left side of the equation, 8 times y is 8y. And so if we look here, we've gotten rid of all the fractions. So now our next step is to get x and y, looking up here at the top, get x and y on one side of the equation, one side of the equal sign, all by itself. And right now we have y on the left side and x on the right side of the equal sign. So what we're going to try and move, we're going to try and get that 5 all by itself. So in order to do that, on the right side of the equal sign with the 5 is a negative 6x, and the opposite of negative 6x is a positive 6x. We know negative 6x and positive 6x cancel, and we're left with a 5 on the right side of the equal sign. Now on the left side, 8y plus 6x. Those are not like terms, so we cannot combine those. And if you look at the very top, it's ax first. So we're going to put the positive 6x first. And this 8y right here was a positive 8y, so we're going to make it a plus 8y. So we have 6x plus 8y is equal to 5. Now let's look at our guidelines. Guideline number 1 says a, b, and c are integers, positive and negative numbers, and 0. A, B, and C are all integers. Guideline 3, A and B cannot both be 0, which that's true, and it's suggested that A is not negative, and if we look at A right here, A is a positive 6. So therefore, you have changed that equation to standard form to look like 6x plus 8y is equal to 5. Now we have another equation here. Instead of fractions, this one has decimals. So just like in the last one, we're going to deal with guideline number 2 first. We're going to get rid of the decimals. I'm giving you a little hint. To change the decimals into integers, just multiply the equation by 10, 100, 1000, etc. And now, how do you know which one to multiply the equation by? Well, let's look. This is right here is 15 hundredths, and this one right here is 2 and 3 tenths. So we're probably going to choose to multiply this by 100. That way we can get rid of the decimal here. That way it'll move the decimal here. It will also move the decimal in 2.3, but it'll get rid of the decimal in both of them if we multiply by 100. So let's go ahead and do that. So multiply the left side by 100, multiply the right side by 100. And we know 100 times y is 100y. And now we distribute here. And 100 times negative 0.15x. Well, a positive times a negative will give us a negative. And I know that multiplying 0.15 by 100 moves the decimal place 2 places. So we're left with negative 15x. And then also if I multiply 100 by 2.3, well, positive times a positive is going to give us a positive. And once again, move the decimal place 2 places. Well, we have to fill in a 0 right there. So we're going to get 230. So looking here, we have fulfilled guideline number 2. We have no fractions, no decimals. Now we need to get x and y on the same side. So add 15x to both sides. Add 15x to both sides. Since 15x and 100y do not have like terms, 15x positive 100y. And that's equal to, those cancel, we're left with a positive 230. So guideline number 1 is met. A and B both are not 0, and it suggested that A is not negative, and 15 is the letter A, and it's positive. One quick thing here, we can factor out, it looks like we can factor out a 5 out of everything. You should always look and see if you can factor out a number out of these numbers here. 15 divided by 5 will give you 3, so we're left with 3x. 100 divided by 5 is 20, so it's 20y. And 230 divided by 5 is going to give us 46. And so now you've changed the equation y equals negative 0.15x plus 2.3 into standard form as 3x plus 20y is equal to 46. This one right here has no fractions and no decimals in it, so guideline number 2 is already met. ax and by, they're already on the same side of the equal sign, but c now is on the same side with them. So we need to move that -7 away from x and y to try and get it into standard form. So in order to do that, if we have a -7, the opposite of subtracting 7, or -7, is adding or a +7. However you think about it. So if we're looking there, negative and positive will cancel out. So we're left with -4x plus 1y is equal to +7. So now that we have x and y on the same side, we know a, b, and c are all integers. There's positive and negative numbers and 0. A and b are not both 0. And it is suggested that a is not negative. Well, if we look, a is negative. So how are we going to get rid of that negative sign? Well, we can multiply 4 by a number to make it positive and still leave it as a 4. -1 is what we're going to multiply both sides by. -1 times -4x will leave us with a +4x, and -1 times -y will leave us with a +y. And then on the right side, 7 times -1 is -7. So now we have 4x plus y is equal to -7. And the equation that we started out with is now written in standard form. And if we look here at this equation, there are no decimals or fractions. Well, there is a fraction. So back from our previous example, we're supposed to multiply both sides of the equation by the least common denominator. Well, this 2 is the only denominator that we have, so we're going to multiply both sides of the equation by 2. Let me rewrite this to be 7/2y times 2. I did that because I like to see my fraction above and below each other rather than side by side, because when we multiply fractions, we multiply the top numbers and the bottom numbers together, and if we have 7, if you have it like this, it's a little difficult to see which one's on top and which one's on bottom. So 2 times 3x, we're going to distribute here, becomes 6x, and 2 times +9 is a +18. And now on the right side, we have 2. Let's make it a fraction. And we know that if we have a 2 on top, we can reduce it by 2, and a 2 on bottom, we reduce it by 2, and we're left with the 1s. So therefore, the top two numbers multiplied, 7 times 1 is 7, and the bottom two multiplied is a 1. So we know 7/1 is 7. And do not forget to put your y there, 7y. We have to try and get ax and by on the same side. So let's go ahead and move 7y. Uh, 6x and -7y cannot go together because they are not like terms. So we will just go ahead and put both of them in our equation. We drop down the +18 with it. And what is that equal to? Typically, we're used to just crossing this off and moving on. But we can't just cross it off and move on. There has to be a number there. What is 7y minus 7y? Well, 7 minus 7 is 0, and since they're like terms, it's 0y, and 0 times y is going to be 0. So we have to have that 0 there. And now, x and y are on the same side, but that c is over there with it. That positive 18 is with it. And we're supposed to try and get that c on the right side of the equal sign, or on the other side of the equal sign. So we have to move that 18. And we're left with 6x minus 7y is equal to negative 18. Guideline number 1 is fulfilled. A, B, and C are all positive, negative numbers or 0. A and B are not both 0. And it is suggested that A is not negative. Well, the 6 is positive. So we've met our suggestion. 6x minus 7y is equal to negative 18. We now have this in standard form. Let's look at this next one. It says write the equation in standard form. If we're looking here, we know we have a vertical line. So vertical lines all have equations that will say x is equal to a number. And in this case, x is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. X is going to be equal to 5. It crosses the y, or it crosses the x-axis at 5. And if we notice, all of these points will have an x value of 5. They all have an x value of 5. And that's a different way of looking at that and coming up with the equation x is equal to 5. Well, you might ask, where's by at? There's no y in this one. If you pay attention to guideline number 3 says a and b cannot both be 0. So essentially what we have here is x plus 0y is equal to 5. And now this is starting to look more like standard form. A is 1, B is 0, and C is 5. But we don't want to leave the equation like this. We want to simplify and clean it up a little bit. And that's the reason why we leave it as x is equal to 5. Because we know that 0 times y is 0, and x plus 0 is x. So x equals 5 is the equation for this red line on the graph in standard form. Looking here at number 8, I'm on slide number 8, that's why I'm saying number 8. We have the y-axis, and this is a horizontal line. We know horizontal lines have an equation that'll say y is equal to something. And this horizontal line crosses the y-axis at negative 6. So it has a standard form equation of y equals negative 6. And just like in the previous example, x is not there because there's a 0 in front of it. 0 times x is 0, and 0 plus y is y. Y is equal to negative 6. The yellow line on the graph has a standard form equation of y equals negative 6. Now we're going to come to a situation here where it says write the standard form of an equation of the line passing through the point 4, 4 and negative 2, 3. Well, in this situation, you have to either put it in slope-intercept form first or point-slope form, and then you solve it out like we did in the first 4 examples, and getting ax plus by is equal to c. So in this situation, I'm going to put this, I'm going to write a point slope form of an equation, and then I will change it to standard form. So the slope, we're going to say 4 minus 3. 4 minus 3. And then, since I chose this 4 first, I have to choose this 4 first on the bottom. 4 minus negative 2. And we can work this out. 4 minus 3 will give you a 1. And 4 minus negative 2 becomes 4 plus 2, which is 6. So the slope is going to be 1/6. Now we're going to write this in point slope form. Let's go ahead and do that. We're going to say y minus, let's use this point here, y minus 3 is equal to the slope, and x minus negative 2 becomes x plus 2. Go ahead and let's go ahead and simplify this. 1/6 times these, 1/6 times x becomes 1 over 6x plus, and if we think about it, 1/6 times 2 over 1 becomes 2 over 6, which is equal to 1/3. And on the left side, this is what we have. Going back to our guidelines, guideline number 2 says no fractions, no decimals. So in order to get rid of the fractions, we multiply by the least common denominator, and the least common denominator that they have in common, multiples of 3, go 3, 6, 9, 12, multiples of the denominator 6, 6, 12, 18, and we know 6 and 12 are what they have in common, but the smallest one is 6. So that's what we multiply both sides of the equation by, is 6. Distribute 6 times y, 6 times negative 3, remember it's a negative, gives you a negative 18. On the right side, 6 times 1/6 x. Well, if we have 6 over 1 times 1 over 6, we know these cancel out to become a 1. And 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times 1 is 1. So you have 1 over 1. So 1 over 1 is just 1. And then we have x there, 1x. Then we have to take 6 times 1/3. So 6 over 1 times 1/3. Well, I'm looking at 6 on the top and 3 on the bottom. I know 3 goes into 3 once, and 3 goes into 6 twice. I'm reducing before I multiply. And multiply the top numbers. 2 times 1. Multiply the bottom numbers. 1 times 1. And since both numbers are positive, the answer is positive. So 6 times 1/3 is going to be 2. Guideline number 2 is met. We have no fractions or decimals. Now we're trying to get ax plus by on the same side of the equal sign. Y is on the left, x is on the right. So let's go ahead and subtract x from both sides. I'm looking here. I don't want to subtract x from both sides, because in the end we're trying to get a to be positive, and if I subtract x from both sides, a is going to be -1 there. So let's hold off on that thought. Follow me on this one. Let's subtract 6y from both sides. Subtract 6y from both sides. So we know these cancel. So we have -18 is equal to x minus 6y plus 2. You cannot combine 1x and 6y. Just because they have variables doesn't mean they're like terms. They both have to have the same variables with the same exponents. And this is what we have. Now we have ax and by on the same side of the equal sign. The only issue is we have that plus 2 over there with it. So let's get rid of that plus 2. The opposite of adding is subtracting. So on the left side, I'm running out of room here. Let me erase some of this fraction multiplication. On the left side, negative 18 minus 2 becomes negative 20. And on the right side, the 2's there canceled out, so we're left with x minus 6y. And you might look at this and say, you know what? This doesn't look like ax plus by is equal to c, and because ax and by are on the left side, but in our situation, ax and by are on the right side. Well, that's an easy fix. If negative 20 is equal to x minus 6y, x minus 6y must be equal to negative 20. And there you have standard form. All guidelines are met. A, B, and C are integers. There are no fractions, no decimals. A and B are both not 0, and the suggestion that A is positive is true here. A is that 1 in front of the x. Here's another example. I'm going to get you set up in the point-slope form of equation, then I'm going to let you try and change it to standard form on your own. Let you get some work in here. So if we look, first step, we need to find the slope. So m is equal to, in this situation, we're going to say negative 5 minus 1. And then we're going to say 2 minus negative 4. On the top, negative 5 minus 1 gives you a negative 6. And on the bottom, 2 minus negative 4, well, we know minus and negative, we have to add. 2 plus 4 is now going to be 6. So now that we have negative 6 over 6, a negative divided by a positive is negative, and 6 over 6 is 1. So now we have a slope of negative 1. So let's go ahead and put this in a point-slope form of an equation. We say y minus. Which point are you interested in using? It doesn't matter which point you use. Let's go ahead and use this one. Y minus I sub 1, which is negative 5. So y minus negative 5 is going to give us y plus 5. The slope goes here, and the slope is negative 1, so we're going to put negative 1. And then x minus, and right here is x sub 1. So this is kind of in point-slope form. If we were running this in point-slope form, we wouldn't put the 1 there. We would put the negative sign, but we wouldn't put the 1 there. I'm going to go ahead and put the 1 in here. That way we know we're going to multiply by negative 1. So this isn't the final form, so that's the reason why I have it in there. So this is where we're at. This is where you're at. I want you to go ahead and try and work this out and try and get this into standard form of ax plus by is equal to c, and make sure you follow your guidelines and refer back to your notes. You should have some notes on those. And pause the video. I'm going to work this out, and then you can check your solution at the end with mine. First step, distribute. Negative 1 to all these. Negative 1 times x will give you a negative x, negative 1x. And negative 1 times negative 2, negative times a negative gives you a positive, and that's a 2. 1 times 2 is 2. Okay, our whole goal is to try and get x and y on the the same side, and I'm looking, this is a negative x, and our whole goal is to try and get a to be positive. So let's go ahead and switch this up a little bit, and we're going to add x to both sides. And when we add x to both sides, that will make a be a positive 1. The y we knew before was a positive y, so we're going to put plus y. And then the 5 is positive, and that's equal to negative x plus x gives you 0x, and we have a positive 2 right there, still on the right side. Our whole goal is to try and get x and y on one side of the equation without any numbers. So let's get rid of that 5 by subtracting. And those cancel out, so we have x plus y is equal to 2 minus 5, negative 3. So now if we look here, follow your guidelines. A, B, and C. A is 1, B is 1, those are the invisible ones, and C is going to be negative 3. A, B, and C are all integers. There are no fractions and decimals. A and B are not both a 0, and C suggested that A is positive, and we've met all the guidelines. So through meeting those guidelines, you have the standard form of an equation that passes through those 2 points. Here's another one. You go ahead and see if you can do this one on your own. Do the whole problem on your own. You can pause the video, and then I will work out the solution. The solution here, we have to find the slope first. So we're going to say, I'm going to say 7 minus 4 on top. And since 7 was first, 5 has to go first. 5 minus 1. 7 minus 4 is positive 3, and 5 minus 1 is a positive 4. And that's 3/4. And I did that because I knew that if I did it this way, I would have positive slope there. If you did it the other way, 4 minus 7, 1 minus 5 gives you a negative 3 over a negative 4, and then you just have one more step in saying a negative divided by a negative is a positive. You still get the same answer. The important thing is that you pay attention. If you put 7 first, 5 has to go first on the bottom. All right, so we have the slope. Now let's go ahead and put this in point slope form. Putting this in point slope form, we say y minus, let's go ahead and go with this number. This, I like that 1 there. Y minus 4 is equal to 3 over 4, and in parentheses, x minus 1. Next step is to distribute that 3/4 to everything. So 3 over 4 times x will give you 3 over 4 x. And 3 over 4 times, pay attention to your sign here, negative 1 will give you a negative 3/4. Excuse me there. And let's go ahead and get guideline number 2 out of the way with no fractions and no decimals. It says multiply by the least common denominator. Well, we have 2 denominators, but they're both the same, which is a 4. So we're going to multiply both sides by 4. On the right side, 4 times y is 4y. On the left side, 4 times negative 4 is a negative 16. On the left side here, 4 times 3/4. Let's come over here and look. 4 over 1 times 3 over 4. Well, we know if we have 4 on top and bottom, we can reduce each one of those by the same number. We can reduce each one by a 4, which is the largest number we can reduce by. 4 goes into 4 once. Multiply the top numbers. 1 times 3 is 3 on the bottom. 1 times 1 is 1. 3 over 1 will reduce to 3. So back over here to our work. 4 times 3/4 is 3x. And then 4 times negative 3/4 is going to be negative 3. So we have all the fractions out of the way. Now we're trying to get x and y on the same side. X and y. Let's go ahead and move the x over by subtracting it. The opposite of this positive 3x was a negative 3x. So we have negative 3x, 4y is positive, so we're going to put plus 4y, and the 16 is negative, so we put minus 16. 3x minus 3x is 0x, and we're left with negative 3. We have x and y on the same side of the equal sign, but there's a 16 with it, a negative 16 there. So how do we get rid of a negative 16? You got it, add 16. And so we have negative 3x plus 4y is equal to, and on the right side, negative 3 plus 16 gives you a positive 13. So let's go through our guidelines. We have integers. A is negative 3, B is 4, C is 13. So we have integers there. Guideline 2, no fractions, no decimals. We met that. Guideline 3, A and B are both not 0. They're both not 0. And guideline 4, it is suggested that A is not negative. If we look there, A is negative. It's actually negative 3. So how do we get rid of negative 3? We don't want to get rid of the 3. We just want to get rid of the negative sign. So we multiply both sides by negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 3 is a positive. So positive 3x. Negative 1 times positive 4y will give you a negative 4y. Negative 1 times 13 is a negative 13. And so now the A is positive. We're finished. You have it in standard form. Now, this final step of multiplying by negative 1 could have been resolved clear up here in this step. In this step, if I had not subtracted 3x from both sides, if I would have actually kept 3x on the right side, if you need any more of this, you might want to pause the video and write it down, because I'm going to erase some of this for you. At this step, if I would have subtracted 4y, then we would have gotten something that looks like this. And now if we look, A is positive there. And to finish this out, add 3 to both sides. So 3x minus 4y is equal to negative 13, which is what we had before. You're going to get there to the same standard form equation as long as you follow your mathematical operations properly and correctly. You'll get there. The only thing is, if you want to write this 3x minus 4y equals negative 13, if you want to write it that way, that's probably best. And so it helps a little bit to pay attention to A was positive here, so let's keep it positive by subtracting 4y from both sides. Let's look at this one more example here. Let's see if you can go ahead and write the standard form of this equation that passes through the points 7, 4, and 5, 4. Pause the video. I will work it out here in one moment for you. Let's say m is equal to 4 minus 4, 4 minus 4, and 7 minus 5. 7 minus 5. This is 0 over 2, and 0 over 2 is going to give us 0. Putting this in point slope form, let's use this point. Y minus 4 is equal to the slope, and x minus, well, y minus 4 and x minus 5 right here. Well, we have y minus 4 on the left side, and we know 0 times x is going to be 0, and 0 times negative 5 is also 0, and 0 plus 0 is 0. So y minus 4 is equal to 0. Add 4 to both sides, so y is equal to positive 4. That is in standard. That's in standard form. Should note that y equals positive 4 is going to be a horizontal line, crosses the y-axis at positive 4. And it looks like that one's the last one we have for this video. I appreciate you guys tuning in and watching the video. If you have any questions, just let me know, and we'll get some things figured out for you.